Susan and Kelly, before we jump in, can you each tell me a little bit about yourselves? I'd love to hear a little bit about your story before we jump in.
Sure. So I started out in big tech in the corporate world, had a great career moving through individual roles into senior leadership roles. And then I had a baby and realized I couldn't do both. I have 4 children, very close in age, and then was doing a little consulting, joined a company, helped start a company that taught companies how to set up flexible work policies so they wouldn't lose all of their women who turned 30 and had a baby. And did some recruiting and placement within that space as well. And then I met Kelly about 6 years ago. We were both speaking at a women's conference, and my expertise is executive coaching, all the career stuff. Her expertise is the personal and life coaching, which she'll tell you about in a moment. And we just realized there was this great synergy. First of all, we just really liked each other.
Yeah.
But there was really great synergy between our worlds, because returning to work or pivoting in work is a personal and a professional process. So we have designed this program originally for caregivers who are returning to work after career breaks. But we now partner with Fourblock, which is a veteran career readiness program in 17 locations based right there in New York. And now we offer a 10-week program that you mentioned for military spouses, because their experiences are also sacrificial, but they're very different from their service members' experiences.
Yeah. And I actually began my career in education. I was a teacher, I did administration, and then I ended up in educational consulting. And much like Susan, I was waddling around Harlem on an educational consulting job, and I was extremely pregnant. And, my husband's calling me and saying the sink is stopped up and the nanny was late. And I was like, something has to give. So I opted out for a period of time, and I really took a good, hard, reflective look at what I wanted to do next. And during that period of time, I always said to myself, I wish there was something to help women guide themselves back into the workplace. And it is such a personal journey. There is so much that you can learn about yourself and what you offer and what you bring to the table, and the confidence that you may have lost during that period of time. And so I actually went back to school, became a certified life coach, learned all about ways that you can strategically look at what is happening for you, and then make the best right decisions and steps in your life so that you are in alignment with what you value most. And so really interestingly, Susan and I, so I did that actually it's about 15 years ago now that I started doing that. And I had a private practice of women that I was coaching. And I needed someone to do the strategic career end of things. We were at this women's conference, and I heard her speak, and I was like, we're going to lunch. That's it. Like, we're going to go to lunch.
She was the impetus between it. Now, neither of us is military.
Yeah.
And that's something that we talk about a lot with our military spouse cohorts. But Kelly is the daughter of a service member, an Army veteran from Vietnam. And my son just deployed last week for his first tour. He's a West Point graduate who just started his career in military. So we don't understand the military spouse experience. We are very empathetic to it. We've learned a lot about it from working with hundreds of spouses ourselves. But what we bring to this event and to our military spouses is a deep understanding of what's happening in the civilian world, because it's not so easy to translate between their very different languages. So, for example, PCS, which you stumbled on and we stumbled on too when we first read it, it means permanent change of station. So basically they are transferred. And some of our military spouses move every 18 months. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult to get career traction when you're moving every 18 months. Or you're worried about moving in another 18 months. And then the voluntold is just a cute little word that describes how they are very active volunteers, often not told by their choice.
Yes,
exactly.
This is your,
this is what you're going to do.
This is what you're going to do. But there is such value in all of those moves and what it's currency that you can bring to the workplace and in those volunteer positions. And we're almost like, we teach them how to translate that and put it out into the world.
Yeah. And we give them permission to value the things that they've done that are unconventional.
Absolutely.
So one of our favorite sayings is work, whether it's paid or unpaid. So helping them really claim the things that they've done and share them with employers in the world.
Yeah, that's so true. The transferable skills are endless. And I think a lot of folks it's hard to see that from the inside. And I can hear what I'm hearing you saying is that you're helping translate that. You're like, oh, you can do this, you can do this, you've done this, that's this, and this job, right? Yeah. So we're going to
How
get
do we
more into
connect
those
the dots?
details too. What,
That's
sorry?
right. How do we connect the dots of all of
Yes.
that and make it make sense?
Yeah.
That's right. Not these disparate stars, but one very powerful constellation.
Oh, I like that.
Hey, I offer it up. It's a public call. Go ahead, run with it.
All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing that too, with your personal stories and learning about your connections to active members. With your father, Kelly, and Susan, your son. You said so. That's a unique perspective. So thank you so much for opening up and letting us know that as well.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear about if you each would like to talk about these unique challenges. You touched a little bit on it when we were starting to get going here. Some of these unique challenges that military spouses in particular face in the workplace.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think the one of the biggest things we talked about, that not being able to get any traction because you're not staying anywhere long enough. But over time, you end up having a resume of, as you to use your word, of disparate experiences that don't always make sense. And often you're settling. So we will see military spouses who continually acquire education. We've met military spouses with 2 PhDs, unrelated, because I can't really get a job, so I'm just going to keep acquiring education. It's also a place sometimes where they'll hide. They'll assume they can't be employed, so they'll just continue to earn education credits. Another thing that they'll do is just take the easy job, the job that's available to them. And what happens, and Kelly will talk a little bit about what happens in the mindset, but what happens is it's really easy to get a job as a paraprofessional in an elementary school where your kids work. You're on the same schedule, you get to be around the kids. It's very easy to get a job as some type of support person, either as a volunteer at your faith organization or in a small practice. But what happens, right, or a lot of opportunity also right there on the installation. So what happens is I, as a military spouse, start thinking that that's all I can do. Right.
Right. And from the personal side of things, as mil spouses, you are the visionaries for everyone in your world. You are the visionaries for your service member. You're the visionaries for your children. You're the visionary of every PCS that you make. And what happens and what we have seen is our male spouses stop being the visionaries of their own lives. What direction do I want to go in? What work do I want to be doing? And so a big part of where you have to start is knowing and understanding your brand. And all that is who are you and what do you bring to the table? And so we do a lot of work around getting a better understanding of who you are now at this place in your life, given all these experiences that you've had, and what do you want? What direction do you want to go in? And that, I would say,
that question is something that they never ask themselves. They are always living in service. We had one student who said, I'm finally going to be in the driver's seat. I have been in the passenger seat for 18 years. Yeah. So, and these are things that they can, that the military service spouses right now watching can do on their own. It's really taking an inventory of what do I do, and giving yourself permission to say, what do I do in this volunteer role? What do I do when I'm volunteering in the school, when I'm serving on the base? Some of the things that we see that are very common, regardless of level of education or level of experience, is real agility.
Yes.
And that is one of the things that most employers are looking for right now. You will never find a more agile person, because these women, for the most part, they're women. They're not all women. We have plenty of men that come through too. But these spouses on a dime will move to a country that they can't find on the map, that speaks a language they don't know, may even have a different, written alphabet than we have, in 2 weeks. And that's not just moving two adults. That's moving sometimes children, sometimes elderly parents, pets, and everything you've accumulated. And they can do it quickly on 2 weeks' notice. There's an incredible agility, incredible resilience, because they're often they're sending their spouse, their father or mother of their children, off into harm's way while trying to keep everybody buoyed up behind them. So some of these softer skills that we're seeing now are becoming even more important for employers as the jobs are changing so quickly are things that we know our military spouses have in spades and are really marketable for them.
Yeah. And a little later on, I think we're going to talk about some success stories that we've had with our students. And actually, we employed one of our students specifically for many of the things that Susan was just talking about, but we'll talk about that a little later. Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's so wonderful to hear. And I can only imagine how difficult for just about anyone that would be to just pick up and move your entire life, your people, your stuff, your pets. Like you said, I look down because my dog is a That's just that, like you said, use your word agility, and that is pivotal in careers and in workplaces today, because you said the world is changing so fast. There's always this new technology, there's new protocols, there's all these things that are constantly changing. And with someone that has that experience, I imagine we can count on them to be able to learn quickly and implement quickly, right?
And their level of resourcefulness of, if I don't know how to do it, I will figure out a way. And I'm not going to be that person that's like asking 10 million questions. I'm going to dig in and then come to you with the answers. I mean, like what boss doesn't want that?
Exactly. You know? And one thing I wanted to add to that, just to put some data around it, because it's really easy to say employers appreciate these and value these skills, because we've been saying that for 20 years. But McKinsey did a recent report that showed that by 2030, the top skills that tech companies want include things like agility, ability to collaborate. One of Google's top skills required is humility. And the humility to realize that we have no idea what the landscape of work is going to look like. It is changing at a pace that we've never seen before because of the introduction of AI. But even before that, the ability to outsource jobs that we thought would only be done here. And so by 2030, of the top 5 skills that tech companies will be looking for, only one of them is technical, and that's the 4th. So I thought that was, and that's McKinsey. That's a pretty reliable source. Yeah,
that's fascinating. And I completely understand that. And I love hearing that humility is the top one, because that was so much of this technology and workflows. There's a lot of, okay, just try to go figure out how this works. There's like a lot of that.
I don't know how
I don't know how it works.
Right. I don't know how this works. My boss doesn't know how this works. It's my job to maybe figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, we can't tell you how many of our students return to work after, large gaps, and they come back to us and they say to the other students that are, in the process of job seeking, don't worry about it, because nobody really knows what they're doing there. Nobody is like an expert. You have that ramp up time. There's plenty of it because everyone else around you doesn't know what they're doing either. So,
yeah, I imagine this is a really, rich time, even though there's the job market is going up and down, but I imagine this is a really rich time for folks to enter the workforce, because there is so much stuff changing so quickly. And like you said, the humility, the agility seems like it's more needed than ever before with everything that's happening.
It is. I mean, you're still going to find, it's
the challenging time.
The culture can change, but it takes a while for individual managers, hiring managers, and recruiters to change. One thing that we have seen over the last 6 years even is a real impetus for hiring military service members and family members. So, for example, in many of the major corporations, and so we are closest to Metro New York, but this is true all through the country, companies have designated people who are military liaisons in the talent department. So recruiters who are looking for military spouses, military service members. We have companies that have targets. So now military is considered one of the desired populations to bring into an organization. That's a really great thing. So we always tell our military spouses, don't hide the fact that you're a military spouse. It used to be, I don't want anyone to know I'm military, because if they do, they're going to know I'm moving and my spouse's job is always going to take precedence. But now we want you to let people know, because they're looking for you.
And COVID has really provided a lot of the flexibility in terms of hybrid work model, fully remote work models. So that's really opened up a lot of doors for male spouses.
Yeah, because that, like you said, that fear of like, oh, I might be gone in a 2 weeks notice. An employer doesn't want to hear that. But now with remote work, that's completely changed, and hybrid work. What are some of the best ways for military spouses to find these remote work opportunities now?
We take a decidedly different approach to that. As far as I'm concerned, I've been working in the replacement world for a long time, 20 years probably. Not any job, many jobs can be done remotely. And we learned that when our hands were forced during COVID. Not every manager wants their people to work remotely. And so what we recommend is that military spouses, if they are really clear on what they want to do and they have a good case for doing it, that they go through the interview process with an organization that they know at least has some threshold for flexibility and hybrid work. But if you go out only looking for jobs that are fully advertised as this is a remote job, you're really limiting yourself. Because I'll tell you, as a manager, I would much rather have my people in the office. But if I find Kelly Biskupiak, because she applies to me and I interview her and I love her and she's my top choice, and then she comes back to me and says, let me tell you how this will work best for me, then I'm going to want to meet her and provide the platform where she can be most successful. But if she comes in advertising, look, I only want to work remotely, I'm not as likely to interview her because I'm holding out for that candidate that I can see in person. Likewise, if she waits for me to advertise a job that says this is fully remote, she's going to be waiting a long time. Yeah. So it's really look for the job first. Now, the only caveat there is if it's a job that you physically have to, if you're a surgeon, if you are, I'm trying to think of it, even
classroom teacher.
Yeah. I mean, even some of those, a critical care nurse. I mean, there are some boundaries here, but for the most part, we want you to look for the job first and worry about the schedule second, and just to close out the answer on that question, most of the jobs that are advertised as fully remote are not particularly professional and challenging. Some of them are, but a lot of them are call center. A lot of them are highly transactional. And if that's what you want, great. But if you're someone who's looking to work in something that's more strategic or more collaborative, sitting at home and you're on a headset is not going to work for you either. Okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious, when you talked about a little bit earlier about there's unpaid work that military spouses have done for years, potentially. How do those skills translate into the marketplace?
Well, I think probably first is, aside from the soft skills we've already talked about, when we think about some of the roles that they take on, often like Megan, who's our operations and marketing manager, she was what's called a key spouse. I think they're changing the name now, but basically if your spouse is an officer, they might have the entire leadership of an entire installation of hundreds of families. So when that unit deploys, that key spouse is in charge of everything on that base. So in charge of making sure families have the services that they need, keeping lines of communication often from places where there isn't a lot of communication. Providing crisis intervention if a family is suffering from mental health issues or substance abuse related to this, earth-changing experience of having your spouse deployed, being the bearer of, God forbid, bad news, planning events, being the liaison with the even more senior leadership in other locations. So it's almost like a chief of staff job, but within it, there's event planning, there's communications, there's crisis management.
There's kind of like a lot of HR type work.
HR, a strategic, a lot of administration. So at a high level. So that's just one job that's common to military spouses. Do you want to talk about some of those?
Yeah. And I also think that when you take that understanding, so those of you who are sitting on this call right now, really think about roles and responsibilities, volunteer roles and responsibilities that you've had in the course of your time where you're supporting your service member that could be translatable into some of the things that Susan was talking about. We actually have a PDF that we're going to provide for everyone today that's going to look at your skills and experience to sort of do a dump of an inventory of all of the things that you've done, and then think about how you can translate that, and it sort of walks you through some questions you can ask yourself.
And we don't want you to be too judicious. We really want you to just write everything down.
Yeah.
And there will be some things that you'll look at and say, okay, well, this really carries more weight than that. And some things that once you start moving forward, you'll realize this probably doesn't belong on a resume. But we want you to really give yourself permission to look at all of it. It's also a great confidence builder, because Kelly was talking earlier about how the confidence takes a real hit.
You start to see like, oh my gosh, I really have done all of these things, and the value that is added from doing those things. In our course, this is a little example of, in our course, we walk you through all of this, and we help you then translate that, really connect the dots to speak to the audience that's going to be the audience in the industry or, field that you want.
And one thing you could do with the template that we're providing is pick a military spouse friend and do it together. Because sometimes we are not as good at claiming our own accomplishments as other people are and recognizing them in us.
100%, 100% true. I think that's really good advice, because it's, when you're in it, you're doing all these things, I might be like, oh, I haven't really done that much. And someone's like, no, what are you talking about? You plan all that stuff for the kids. You did this, you've been here, you did that. And, oh yeah, what does that mean? And then you start hearing adjectives. Yeah, invaluable. And they start describing adjectives like, oh, you have a lot of humility and you're patient. And, then we're working with stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love too, when, you said earlier, to tie it into this worksheet that you're talking about, this permission for folks to find themselves is so important. And I am a big fan, as to use your word, Kelly's, of the brain dumps. You just like put it on paper, screen, whatever, because then it's there, it's in black and white, it's not like bouncing around in my brain anymore, and then I can read it, and it helps me get just slightly more objective about myself. Just slightly.
Well,
but just enough.
I always say, when we do those exercises, there's something about putting pen to paper that's binding, right? It makes it real. It brings it to life. And so when you do that act, that simple little act, it's a trigger, right? Of starting to look at it from a different perspective. And that's oftentimes what keeps us from being stuck, or gets us stuck and then unstuck, is just that shift in your perspective of how you're looking at it.
That's right. A miracle is a change in perspective, right?
I like that one, Ted. Just giving us all kinds of great lines today.
That one I didn't make up. That one's not mine, so I offer that one up.
Okay, good.
So we have just 5 minutes left, if you can believe it or not. I'd love to hear some about these success stories that I could already see you beaming, ready to tell them.
And we have so many. We could be on for another hour.
Yeah,
you'll have to come back and tell more.
Obviously, the ones that we're going to talk about are people that have come through the program, but I'm sure there are many, many spouses out there that have done this without that kind of organized help. Harper was a member of our pilot program with Fourblock, and she herself was an Air Force veteran and a military spouse as well. I think her husband was a Marine. And they were living in rural Oklahoma, where there aren't a lot of jobs. And she really wanted to get into HR. And she had done HR. She might have had, in some military branches, it's called adjunct general, is kind of their version of HR. So, but nobody like the three of us would ever know what that means, right? That's just kind of like a weird name for something that we call HR. And she'd done a lot of HR work, but she really hadn't had the title. She'd had it briefly at one place. So she'd done operations work. She had was still in the reserve, so every month, and she had just taken command. She had a fairly senior role, but she went through the program and was really striking out. She was quite disheartened. And after the program, I actually met with her one-on-one afterwards, because I just, some students just really pull at your heartstrings, because she was the total package. On top of everything, she's like drop dead gorgeous too. It's like, who would not want this person? She's a vet. She's a military spouse. She's smart. She had everything.
But how is she getting missed?
How is she getting missed? And she was getting missed because she didn't have any confidence.
Yeah.
She didn't know how to interview. So she knew how, she just wasn't doing it. And sometimes we see that with HR people too. They're so used to being on one side of the desk, they don't do really well on the other side. And so really it was just teaching her how to feel confident enough in what she'd done to handle a tough question. Like, well, you've never really been an HR person. So, I don't know why you think you could come here telling me you want an HR job. So I would be like really awful hiring manager, asked that kind of question, and she'd work her way through. The long and short of it is she landed a job at LinkedIn, which was fully remote. It was not advertised as fully remote. It was advertised as hybrid, but she's in Oklahoma. I forget where she went. She went to some other, the Army doesn't have the best locations. If you really want the nice area, you go to Navy. But so she's doing great. And she just recently pinged us and said she was promoted. So she's in an HR leadership role. And then another one, so Kelly was talking earlier about like just trying to figure out where you belong. We had one student who was thinking, well, I think I might want to open a gym, but I also think I might want to go to school because I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. She was kind of all
Like
over
her
the place.
dream job was like, if I could, start it
Do
all
anything.
over again, I'd be an orthopedic surgeon. And
Yeah.
that was not going to be possible. However,
And she also had moved about every 18 months. Her husband was an officer. She ended up taking her experience in business sales from years ago and her interest in orthopedics to become a clinical specialist for a company that makes orthopedic not prostheses, but things that are used in surgery. So she's actually in surgery.
She's in surgery
with surgeons,
telling them what to
doing
do.
cool stuff. Yeah.
Telling them what to do.
And she also is one of those had a PCS'd about every 18 months for
For
15
a
years.
Time. And then Megan is our success story. We are so proud of her, but she really came through the program, did every part of the program to a level and a degree that we looked at each other and we said, gosh, we need someone to come in and really be an operations person, really be someone who's going to organize, is going to allow us to be who we need to be and have our expertise shine. And then, so she used her skill set and
we also realized that one of the things that was keeping us from doing stuff like this was the marketing. So she does all of our marketing now. And so those are just three of many success stories.
Yeah. Well, rooting for Megan too, because those skills, operations people and marketing people, are worth their weight in whatever is the most valuable thing you can imagine. Well, Susan, Kelly, this has been so lovely. I hope we get to do this again sometime. What are the best ways for folks to reach out and connect with you and perhaps do the worksheet with you?
Yeah. The best thing for them to do, well, they're going to get the worksheet anyway. If they want to reach out to us, it would go to LinkedIn's probably the best place. And they can find our business page is just prepared to launch you, the letter U. And we're on there all the time. If they are interested in participating in the Fourblock program, they can ping us there, or they can go to the Fourblock website or ours. It's fourblock.org, FOURBLOCK, or preparetolaunchu.com, either one. And they can apply. The program is fully underwritten by corporate sponsors, and we take cohorts 3 times a year.
Amazing. And friends, if you want to make sure you connect with them, you can go back to the page of this event and you can connect and find all of their info there as well at the end of the day. If you're frantically scribbling things right now, don't worry, we got you, friends. So Susan, Kelly, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for making the time.
You too.
Thanks, Hunter.
Yeah, take care.
Okay, take care now.